All right. A little Q&A.
Welcome to the fold.
Welcome to the Q&A. I'm your host, the captain.
Did you weed out all the, we typically get the same batch of questions no matter where we go?
So some of these are similar to what we've answered in the past,
Okay.
but it's kind of, well, where are we at now?
Gotcha.
And you'll notice those questions as we go along. So first, we want to thank everybody that submitted a question. We had questions submitted to us by Instagram and I believe Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And any question that was like a duplicate question or a question that was similar to somebody else's question, we just kind of lumped them all together.
Okay.
So we're not going to read the people's names. Also, they're also handles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not people's real names, so it gets even messier to read.
But if you submitted a question, just know we thank you. We appreciate it. We love you.
Chances are you're going to hear your question and go, that was me.
That was me. I'm going to tell them all my friends. And now that we're not going to read anybody's names, if you hear a really good question, you can tell your friends that was your question.
Right.
Even if it wasn't.
But you're not even on Instagram.
Right.
It's okay. All right, so the first question, I thought this was an odd question coming to podcasters, but it was, what was your first concert? Like rock and roll concert.
Well, so in complete truthfulness here, my actual first concert, I believe, would have been the Oak Ridge Boys. I was very little and just kind of tagged along with my mom and dad. And I actually enjoyed it. I remember going home and then like asking my father, like, hey, can I listen to your Oak Ridge Boys tapes?
Elmira.
Yeah. Elvira.
Or Elvira. Elvira.
I don't know that I remember any of the other songs, but like first concert that I went to, willingly, old enough to buy my own ticket and go, would have been, there was a local show at the big amphitheater here in Columbus. This would have been early 90s. And the setup was, it was all actually local bands. There was a local radio station here called The Blitz. Well, they're still around. I just don't listen to them anymore. But The Blitz had done like a local stuff album. So like the best of the best local bands, hard rock bands, techno, heavy metal, all that kind of stuff. And they pulled a handful of those bands that were featured on that CD. And I had that CD and I loved it. And so I went to a concert and watched a bunch of local bands. The headliner was Watershed, which Captain, you know this. Most of our listeners won't know who Watershed is, but
to this day, you're still a Watershed
I'm still a
fan.
huge Watershed fan. One of my favorite bands of all time. Top 5 for the Colonel here.
Yeah, well, maybe they should invite you out to a show.
I don't know that they do shows anymore. The one guy moved to the West Coast a couple years ago to get away from me.
Right. There was a restraining order.
But they were actually popular enough that they got signed to Sony Records for a while and couldn't really catch on nationally. But they're inspired heavily by Cheap Trick, so that'd give people kind of a vibe of who they are and what they sound like.
There was another local band that was signed. They sang Alcohol.
Yeah, Hal and Maggie.
Yeah, friends. I've been friends with Andy Harrison, their guitar player, for years.
They had a song.
Alcohol.
They had a song too called "I'm a Slut," which was a local hit.
It's probably based off of
"I'm a Slut." That's why you love me. That's why you hate me too.
I think my first concert was the Dare Band.
I think I went to the same. Was that Slam Circus? Was that the name of the band?
I don't remember what they're.
I just
thought they
remember
were just called the Dare Band.
You mean the cops? The actual cops playing the
off drugs. Keep a kid off drugs.
I'm thinking of a completely different. So the thing I'm thinking of was there was like a walkathon to raise money for the local Dare project or whatever, and they hired some local band. But you're talking about the actual, like, they look like they're police officers,
right? And then all their guitars were like shaped like guns and stuff. I was like, yeah. Dare to keep a kid off drugs. Keep a kid.
Wasn't to give a kid some hope. Keep a kid off dope. Give a kid some hope.
Give a kid some dope.
It's amazing that they weren't like a huge,
It's not.
like world tour.
One of my good friends, CP1, that's what I call him. I had two friends with it. Chris, last name with a P. And so I had one in through elementary school and high school, even into college. And then I met another one. So he became CP2. But CP1 went to see the Ninja Turtles concert. And I remember just being so jealous, like, oh my, your parents took you.
I don't remember that. This is the Ninja Turtles, like their full costume, pretending to play instruments. I mean, how could you play anything with those giant fingers?
Yeah. And I just remember that. I remember not only did he go to the Ninja Turtles concert, but he also had the Simpsons CD.
Oh, this is one of your rich friend CP1.
Yeah, and he wasn't rich. I mean, same class, but the difference was, having four siblings and then they only had two, and then you go, why does he get so much more stuff than I do? But anytime he complained about his parents, I kept on thinking Ninja Turtle concert.
Right. How dare you speak ill of these people?
How dare you?
I don't know any. I didn't even know that they did concerts. I remember that Vanilla Ice ruined his career by doing the soundtrack.
No. He solidified himself as a legend for all time by doing Yo Ninja Rap.
Was that what it was called?
Go Ninja, go Ninja,
go. Yeah.
See, everybody knows that, and if you don't know that, you better ask somebody.
Somebody's paying $1.99 to download that right now on iTunes.
All right, here's another question. What's the best film? Trust me, these get more true crime as we go, but what is the best film that you have seen in the last few years? And I don't think this is technically true crime, it's just film.
Oh. That's rough. I've seen a lot. I mean, I really liked the Halloween movie, and we talked about that here, but I think probably the best movie, if I had to really pick one that I've seen in the last few years, it's kind of a vague question here. What was that? 3 Billboards Outside of? I can't remember the title of it.
I haven't watched that yet, so no spoilers.
Dude, I loved that movie. I thought it was great. Woody Harrelson's in it, who
is the best.
He's just a fantastic
he is the best
actor.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had and I'm going to get crucified for this. It's the lady from Fargo. She was in Fargo. She's a big time actress. I don't know her name though.
Yeah, but she's
I think
amazing.
She
won a bunch of awards
for this. Yeah, 3 Billboards Outside of.
Yeah.
I don't know where it was. I don't remember where it was.
Wow.
But it
must have been a great movie.
Here's what I will say. For those of you out there looking for a movie to watch that you like true crime, this is pretty close to true crime. I mean, it's a fictitious movie, but it is like her daughter is, I don't remember if she's missing or murdered, but there's an investigation that's going on.
Were you drunk when you watched this? Because you don't know much about it.
Well, I'm getting thrown this question. I probably watched this movie like 6 months ago.
Okay.
It's not like I watched it last night.
So you've been drunk since then.
Yeah.
That's why you can't remember.
Epping, was it three billboards outside of Epping? I don't know.
I'm not looking.
Epping, Missouri.
I
don't know.
Yeah, 3 billboards. That's how I know it. So yeah, mine is, and I've talked about this a lot, David Foster Wallace's movie, The End of Tour. It was life-changing for me. Then I told a bunch of people, watch it. And then everybody watched it and said, it's pretty good. And I was like, glad that the life-changing movie for me was just pretty good for you. But I think it all, the perspective of where you're coming from. But Jesse Eisenberg and Jason Segel. Jason Segel is amazing. Jason, give me a call. Put me in one of your movies. I could play your handsome brother or something.
I should have just tapped on my iPad right at the start of this question. 3 billboards outside of Ebbing, Missouri, and it's Frances McDormand is the mother who rents 3 billboards to call attention to her daughter's unsolved murder. So murder mystery watch it.
All right. Here's another question. Number 3. Why do you steer towards the more widely and well-known cases as opposed to doing more local cases? Now, look.
I think it's debatable that we do that.
Right. That's why I was like, it all depends on what you pay attention to. I mean, yes, we've done Scott Peterson, Michael Peterson. When you hear cases like that, or I think we plan on covering the Chris Watts case eventually. These are big cases that are in the media spotlight, and so we'll get tons of requests. So,
right,
very thankful to have a bunch of listeners. So, hey, that's what you guys want to hear us talk about. That's what we'll try to talk about. To fill in the gaps of that, when we're picking the cases, they're normally 90-some%. The cases that we're picking are cases that are not covered nationally.
Yeah, so the way that I kind of describe this to my friends or people that ask me similar question, like, how do you decide what cases you pick? Well, I kind of describe it like this. Like, I think 75% of the cases we choose are driven by listener request. And 25% are kind of ones that you and I might dig up on our own. But we really try to focus and let the listeners have a big time say-so in what cases we cover. And like the captain just said, the well-known cases do get more, we do receive more requests for them because they're just better known. I mean, but
well, and the other problem with this question, it's not a bad question, but one of the other issues is what a well-known case to you is might not be a well-known case to somebody else.
True.
I mean, there's a lot of people that I know that will just pop in and listen to a show from time to time on just for our show, and so they're popping in, and they might, Brandon Lawson is a pretty popular case now,
right.
Talked about, tons of YouTube videos about, tons of podcasts where they talk about the Brandon Lawson case. When we covered that case, it wasn't a huge case, it wasn't super popular, so I think
we covered Tony Muncie. Nobody. I mean, pardon me, but outside of Tony's...
Nobody's still covered it, I don't believe.
Outside of Tony's family, I don't know that anybody has discussed his murder in the last 20 years.
And maybe we're just being defensive dicks. Okay. Question number 4.
Yep.
If you had a chance to know what actually happened... Now, this question was posed by multiple people in multiple ways, so I put them all together.
Okay.
If you had a chance to know what actually happened, and one missing person case or an unsolved case, what case would that be?
I would have to go Zodiac. So you could pick really any of the murders in that string of murders, but you would know who did it.
Right.
That for me, I kind of almost dislike this type of question because I think it's an interesting discussion.
We asked for all these questions.
No.
Now we're judging you on your questions.
Well, they're judging us on the answers. I dislike this kind of question for this reason. It's really hard for me to pick. I mean,
right.
And that's what makes this a good question, though.
Yeah, right. And we've had this question before, but
I mean,
what makes it such a great question is if you ask us next week, the answer is probably going to change.
If you ask me 10 minutes from now, it's going to. I'm sitting here going West Memphis 3. It's Jack the Ripper, Amy Mahalovic.
Amy Mahalovic. Lately, I've been re-diving into that case.
Yogurt shop.
And that one kind of, I'd say right now, just for what I've been diving into, like when we get a break, and maybe I'm all caught up on the research for next week's show. Mm-hmm. I've been diving into some interesting theories on the Amy Mahalovic case. Like, she had an older brother, correct?
Yeah, Jason.
Yeah, so I got a couple people that sent me some really interesting theories on some people that were connected to the brother.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an angle that I've never really heard before or thought about before, because it really kind of went straight to teachers and administrators and things like that. So to be diving into a whole different aspect has been pretty interesting. So I'd say right now, if I could know what happened in the Amy Mahalovic case, that would be awesome. But there's like 3 that always pop to my mind: West Memphis 3, Adnan Syed, and then lately the Stephen Avery case. I'd really like to know exactly what happened. And a lot of people go, well, especially like Adnan Syed supporters would go, well, he's innocent. Well, I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying there's things that don't make sense in that case, whether he's innocent or guilty. They don't make sense to me. So I want to know why they make sense. The rigor mortis always drives me nuts there. And then also the tales of the wide fishy tales of Jay always is a mystery to me. And the other one that gets me is Donnie. Donnie's alibi still doesn't make any sense to me. I'd like to know about that alibi. And think about this. If you got the details of it, what if his story actually was the truth? Like this whale of a story of how he worked at a different location that day. Like, if you could find out those details later, because sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes things don't line up. Somebody looks very suspicious. Somebody looks like they're the number one suspect, and then out of nowhere, DNA proves that they're not the guy.
Right.
And then it kind of blows your mind because there's 1 or 2 points that just didn't add up. And then all of a sudden they do. And you realize the person was telling the truth. Okay.
Long Island serial killer would be another. See how difficult this question is?
We're just 20 minutes later.
You know what would save us the most time personally, though, is if West Memphis 3 was solved. Because that's the one that you and I keep bumping our heads. It's what, maybe once a month we end up in an hour-long discussion about West Memphis 3?
Yeah.
It would save us a lot of time going forward. I hate to sound selfish here, but
I'd have to find another hobby. All right, number 5. How does Nick come up with the so clever and so funny captain intros?
Well, the captain does write some of those. I write some of them, and I do find a lot of them other places. Like I might hear somebody say something similar, or if you see like something funny on a beer sign at a bar, those work well.
Yeah, sometimes we have buddies that send them. My buddy Morgan sometimes sends one, or my buddy Joe sends one. I'm sure some of your buddies send you some.
Yeah, and so it's not really... sometimes I do come up with a clever one, or the captain comes up with a clever one himself. But I did have somebody ask me a question the other day, sent me an email, and they wanted to know, do you know what the intro is going to be before I say it? And I told them, I said, most of the time not, because I'm kind of showing up with it already scripted out. But there are occasions where you write the intro, so obviously you know it then. But the neat thing is sometimes I just kind of throw one out there, and then you have to kind of react to it.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm reacting by going, that one's not even good.
Right.
And then we just rewrite one on the spot. So a lot of those come Seinfeld references, Larry David references, and also I think we're both fans of comedians, so you'll hear like little jokes on the Tonight Show or Saturday Night Live, and we just try to... some of them are, they're stolen jokes.
Yeah, Steve Martin.
Yeah, we're not comedians here.
We've stole a lot of Steve Martin.
We stole a lot of Steve Martin.
We stole his whole damn career.
Yeah. Well,
and we've made nothing compared to what he's made.
I'm working on playing some banjo. So no, I mean, so that's as a tip of our cap to that. And
it is difficult though, because we've done like 200 and, because we didn't do captain intros right off the get. Right when we first started, but we've probably done 250 of them.
Yeah, and what's nice though is we've had comedians like Chris D'Elia listen to the show, Michael LaNoche, Chris D'Elia's opener, Chris and Carney, which is a very funny host of the Mentally Ill or Mentally Chill podcast, and she got into our show because of the captain intros, because there were so many Seinfeld references, and she's like big fan of Seinfeld. So, so that's
my favorite one. Still is the middleweight thumb wrestling champion of the world,
right? Which was
a long time ago,
like the first 5 episodes, probably.
Right? So I'm hoping that I can recycle it and use it again. That it's almost so old.
Yeah, maybe
maybe next week.
Maybe this week. Okay. How do you guys stay so grounded with all the female attention? I think what
I
they're
don't know
talking.
that there's that much female
I
attention.
think what they're talking about is when we post a picture or something on social media, sometimes the comment threads become kind of silly as far as like you're so handsome. Or
Mhm.
I think that's what they're
Most of
talking
those are
about.
coming from men.
Hopefully, we can only hope. I mean,
I was told I look like a big dork already once today. So
did I tell you that?
no, different friend.
Oh, that's nice.
So
You got good.
that's
You got
how we
nice
stay
friends.
grounded. There's people to kick us.
Well, we do read the comments, but I think if you let with the comments, it's a slippery slope. I mean, if you let the people telling you that you're hot and your voice is sexy or whatever it is, if you let that go to your head, then you're going to let the negative comments go to your heart.
Right.
So I think you have to, it's a fine line.
It
And-
is a nice pick me up though after reading about some depressing cases.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's in good fun. I mean, we've met a lot of married women that say, "Oh, you're my celebrity crush," but their husband's right there taking the picture, and he's
More handsome than we are.
Yeah, he's way better looking, and he's in better shape.
Taller,
He just
broad
doesn't-
shoulders.
He just doesn't want to talk so much about true crime because, he has a life. All right, so how do you feel? This is question number 7. How do you feel? I guess this is directed towards me. How do I feel when I say something hilarious and Nick just keeps going? It's probably a good thing. We got to keep the story rolling. Nick's not a good listener. So it's just, I've been friends with him for years. He's not a good listener, which is fine. Makes him a good talker. And actually, I probably get mad when he laughs or when he's, has to stop the show because then it causes more time of recording and editing. So
I
don't,
had someone recently tell me that I'm being rude to you by not that you'll throw something out there and then I just go back into the story.
yeah, but
Which is not my intention.
But we're also big fans of comedians, and like we were talking about before, like if I'm at home watching a stand-up special, I'm not like cracking up laughing. I'm not like screaming and cheering. I'm not a psychopath. I'm just enjoying it. I'm smiling. Does that make sense? So let's.
No, because you just inadvertently talked shit about me because if I watch a stand up at home, that's how I kind of judge it. If I'm laughing out loud watching a stand up, it's a hit for me. If I get to 15 minutes in and I'm not laughing out loud, I shut it off.
Yeah, mine's more in my face. I'll feel my face getting tired from just smiling. So
Joe Lopez, he used to make some of the he is one of my favorite stand-up comedians. And George Lopez, sorry, I called him Joe.
Joe.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite. I don't even know his damn name. George Lopez, some of his stand-ups you want to talk about psychopath, me. Not only am I laughing out loud, he's made me cry a few times sitting at home watching his stand-up, Why Are You Crying? One of my favorites of all time.
What's so crazy for me with the whole comedy thing is you go watch somebody like Chris D'Elia. Time of your life. He is a master.
He's fantastic.
He contorts his body in such a way. He has kind of a swagger on stage. It's super entertaining, hilarious. Now, look, this is not me talking shit. His stand-up special, good too.
Mm-hmm.
But my face hurt 10 times more live, and comedy's alive.
I about
medium.
I about peed myself when we saw Chris D'Elia live. He's fantastic. And you know what? Jeffrey Ross
Thought
does
I
that
smelled
too.
something.
Jeffrey Ross does that too, where like live, mind blowing, and then like if you watch a stand up on TV, great, still good stuff like Chris D'Elia, but not the experience. Like I think because those guys, especially Chris, that's their level. they are the kings of being on a stage in a dark room.
Right.
Where you get somebody like George Lopez, Jerry Seinfeld, they are the kings of being in a big auditorium.
Right.
That's their kind of thing. I think Chris D'Elia, I think Jeff Ross, I think those guys, if they had more familiarity with that, could be just as good.
Well, and like I saw Tom Segura live, and it was good. Laughed, but you put on a Tom Segura comedy special, Netflix special. I lose my shit. For whatever reason, it like gets to my brain better if I'm watching him on TV as opposed to live, and he's telling the same jokes. So I don't know what that is. I wonder what that is.
There is no great answer for why I don't react to some of the things you say, but I will say this.
Sometimes they're just not funny.
No, but the other thing though, there is some thought that goes into it on my part because there are times where you say something funny and then I will react to that. And then afterwards, like for that initial split second before I can get back into the story, I'm going, okay, well, it was funny when he said it, but I took it and dragged it out longer than it needed to be. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you got to quit while they're still laughing.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I also kind of view it because I'm such a huge Steve Martin fan. I kind of view it on he talked about watching this comedian live, right? And that when you watch this comedian live, that every time there's a punchline, the comedian would smack his belly. So the little smack of his belly was letting the audience know, hey, this is the time you need to laugh.
Right.
And so what's kind of nice about the one-liners when they just pop in and you keep going is it almost feels a little unexpected. Mm-hmm. So, that's why I'll hear a lot about people saying, oh, I spit out my drink or whatever. Yeah, because you didn't know it was coming.
Right.
Because Nick wasn't telling a joke and I told you the punchline. It came out of left field. But that's also kind of where my brain works. But the thing I love about the one-liners is when people say, I was thinking this and then you said it. And that is why a lot of times I won't bite my tongue because I know somebody else out there is thinking that. Mm-hmm. So anyways, thanks for that question. All right. Number 8. If you guys could become a crime-fighting... Let me start again. If you guys could become a crime-fighting duo, what would your superpowers be? Well, first of all, we'd be called the Biggestly Gay Duo. That would be our crime-fighting name. Mm-hmm. I think that might be taken already.
I love that skit. That
Gary.
Yeah, the video short or whatever you want to call it.
What was the other guy's name?
Come back with my show. I don't remember the guys, but
one of them's Gary. I know that.
That's a difficult question because in comic books, what I always thought was the coolest superpower would be to shapeshift, be it size or disguise, or what you look like. I always thought that was the coolest. Like, G.I. Joe, you have Zartan who can take on the appearance of another person. And you have that from Mystique in X-Men as well. And then you have somebody like Ant-Man who can change his physical size.
Yeah.
There was a guy in the old comics, I believe his name was Atom, like Atom, I believe. And he could increase his size and decrease his size. Like he could be as large as he wanted and as small as he wanted. I always thought that was the neatest. But if you're talking like crime fighting duo, then you almost feel like a Batman or a Sherlock Holmes would be better suited for crime fighting duo because
those guys don't have any superhero powers.
But they're the ultimate detective.
No, they're not, because my power would be to see in the past, present, and future. I'd be able to see all times and be able to go at any point, any location at any time I wanted to. Maybe it's just viewing, but if I had that power, there would be no cold cases, my friend. Mm-hmm. But see, I don't know.
Did they say crime solving, crime fighting, or crime stopping?
Well, they said crime fighting duo.
So if you could go anywhere at any time, you could technically stop the crime from ever happening.
Crime too.
You could, and if you had that ability, think about this: you could go back once to see what happened, how it went down,
Right.
and then later go back again to prevent everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be the best. Then Sherlock Holmes and Batman would not be needed at that point.
That would suck.
So you have trumped me. I will go back to controlling how large I am or small I am.
Well, yeah, I need a partner, but you could like fit in my pocket.
If I was like Mystique, I could right. I could also
But if
change
they're not
my
going to let
appearance.
us into the dance club, that you could get like 8 foot tall, and be like, let us into the dance club.
Well, let's say like
The ambiguously gay duo detective. We need to dance before we go solve some crimes.
so you would know with your powers that Joseph D'Angelo would be the original Night Stalker, the Golden State Killer, right?
I knew that before a lot of people.
So think about this setup. Once you've already figured out who it is, now I shrink myself, go into your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
You take us back to before the first murder takes place or the first rape, whatever, before his first crime.
First
And
burglary.
when he walks into the room,
Let's start at the break-ins first.
yes, when he walks into the first house,
Yes.
now I'm sitting there on the couch, but I look exactly like Joseph D'Angelo, just to mind fuck the guy. So he
Right.
comes in, he's like, that's me sitting on the couch. And then
Or is it?
or is it?
Yeah, think about that for a minute.
And then we remove him together from the home.
It's just a
We-
version of him sitting on the couch jerking off
We take him to the couch.
frantically.
We take him to the garage, murder him there, put him in the trunk of our car, drive him out in the middle of nowhere, and bury him. And then
Then we-
original Night Stalker never happened.
Right. Then we move on. Yeah. And then there'd be a different original Night Stalker. Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, but hopefully it's just a guy
Oh, you
looking
mean-
into windows.
Oh, you mean they'd give somebody else the name?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But hopefully we'd solve that one too. So
We would be busy.
people would
You think
not-
we're busy now?
Yeah. You think we're busy now, people. And then we'd report about it on the show. And then it was crazy. Nick got really small, crawled up in the dude's ass, and then got really big. And the guy split in half. And he died.
You could report on all the crimes that we've stopped now, but they would have no proof of such because they never happened.
I just like to see the guy's face every time, guy or girl's face, when I go, yes, we're from the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at me like I'm nuts. And you're like in the palm of my hand because you're small at this point. And then you're like, yeah, we're from the future. And then he's like, okay, it's time to fight. And then you become 20 feet tall.
And
just to
take
watch
on his
his-
appearance.
Yeah, and you look just like him. Even though, why wouldn't you take on like a bigger guy's
I could take on
appearance?
anybody's appearance, but I think just to confuse them for a second.
When you're small, you look like Kevin Hart.
Right.
And then when you're
That-
big, you look like The
The
Rock.
Rock.
Yeah, that would be
Smart.
a funny movie. Somebody's going to take that and make that a movie. All right, let's get back to the notes. All right. Number 9. Do you ever get questions or responses from the victims' families after we cover one of their cases? And we've answered this before. I mean, we received several emails thanking us for doing something, correcting something if it was wrong. I don't think they ever do it to be snarky. I think it's normally you reported this, and I think they know that we're really interested in the truth and we're interested in what happened in the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when they correct something that we did, it's normally for us to know more information about the case.
Yeah, we've had several people reach out to us after our coverage, sometimes before, asking us to cover their case, which is great. What's weird though, and this is something that I think I've talked about before, is I never would have guessed this until knowing what we know now, but some of these cases, the family members or people close to the victim, they know less than what was reported in the old newspapers sometimes.
Right.
And what I mean that's weird about that is I always just kind of assume that most of the time that the family is up to speed, that they've almost been working with the detectives and with the inspectors, and that's not always the case. And in a very small percentage of it, they're less informed than the general news is.
Yeah. Sometimes we're getting messages saying how much they learn about the case, which is interesting. And then from time to time, you know, having a victim's, let's say, husband, there was the one that sticks out, a victim's husband, that he just has become an expert on this case. And I think that's simply because he wants it solved. Probably the most interesting one, and I think I can talk about this, I think I've mentioned it before, is when we cover the Tara Grinstead case.
Right.
And then getting a message from Bo Dukes. I can't remember. It's the Duke and the Dukes, right? It's Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes.
I think so, yeah.
But yeah, getting an email, basically, you know, listen to our podcast, and he is the one that, you know, him and his girlfriend came forward, and he confessed to GBI, which got them to get Ryan locked up. And then Ryan's going to be on trial, obviously, for the murder of Tara Grinstead. And a lot of people followed up and vanished, and you never really got a chance to hear Bo talk. But for whatever reason, he listened to our show and said, I think this guy wants to know the truth. And he sent me a message saying, I'd be willing to talk to you. We got on the phone. I mean, this is something obviously his lawyers didn't advise him of doing. His lawyers would probably kill him. And man to man, he said, can you not record this? I said, absolutely not, which I think I actually have the legal right that I could record it. I don't have to give him any knowledge that I recorded it. But I didn't. Man to man, I was like, no, you're willing to talk to me? I want to know what happened. We spent about an hour and a half on the phone. I called him a piece of shit about 20 times on moments where the story lent itself for him to be a piece of shit, and every time he agreed. So it was, you know, I'm not saying anything new. And found it was so interesting to hear his version of the story, because one, a lot of things just become way clearer. Things that didn't make sense before start becoming a lot clearer. And then a lot of these things that people were, little points of evidence that people were looking into years, probably didn't have anything to do with the case. But it was a fascinating conversation. And in that moment, I think when he texted me, like, here's my number, call me, I just thought, like, this isn't real. Like, this isn't happening. Like, I'm going to get all these answers after we just recorded 2 episodes on this case. So it was probably the most fascinating encounter with somebody involved in a case.
I was talking with somebody, a couple family members last week of a case that I want to cover in the future, but there's not a lot of information out there. This kind of goes back to the question we were talking about earlier, if we lean towards more well-known cases. This case is not well-known at all. It's not even well-known in the area that it took place. And it's a case that it's always intrigued me, and I've always wanted to cover it, but there's not much info out there. There's not much of a story, let's say. It would literally be a 15-minute, 20-minute episode.
Right.
So I decided to reach out to some of the family members and talk to them and see what we could figure out, if we could add more to this story. And what was weird was I was taking old information that was in the newspapers at the time and stuff that was later released on the internet, and I based my questions that I had prepped for them off of all of that information. And the interesting thing was, depending on which family member I spoke to, they had a completely different answer or a completely different account of what they thought was going on at the time.
Right.
Now, mind you, in their defense, this case is probably, I don't remember the exact year right offhand, but 25 years old, let's say.
Yeah.
So, of course, memories fade and memories change. They even change after all these years. But it was interesting to hear completely different answers from people that I know that had nothing to do with what happened to their loved one. These are innocent family members. These are people that have been hurting for a very long time. And I don't know if their emotions have filled in some of the gaps, some of the blanks for them throughout the years, or if their suspicions have.
Well, and that's just, I think it happens with time with any family and almost any event. I mean, this is going to sound ludicrous, but there's a story that I remember going over to my mother's house when I was a child, and she was watching me for some reason, and there was no other kids there, and family of a lot of grandkids, and a simple story of she was making me hot dogs. They didn't have buns, and so she was like, well, I'll just take the hot dogs, cut them up, and you can dip them in ketchup. I go, well, I don't like ketchup. Well, how about mustard? Well, I don't like mustard either. You eat your hot dogs plain? Yes. I don't know what I like. And she said, well, do you want to find out? And I said, yes. And so she took ketchup and put it in a pile and mustard in a pile. And then I went through and dipped the hot dogs to taste each one, like relish and everything. Now, when I tell my mother this story, she thinks it's completely false and made up, and it tells me I'm crazy every time.
That you've just made up this.
It's an innocent story.
Right.
There's nothing.
I sit around coming up with these.
Right, and that's my argument is I'm not talking about like a discipline time, like, oh, my grandma spanked me with a belt or whatever.
It's so simple and yet detailed that it has to be true.
Right. Why would I make that up?
Right.
It's ridiculous, but it's just to show you that that's kind of how history works, especially family history. Or,
right.
I mean, there's been plenty of times that we've talked about being in a band back in the day, and there's probably certain events that you remember way different than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's always fun, too, is when you're hanging out with somebody that you know real well and have known for a long time, and they tell you a story of something that happened when all of you were there and present.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, you sure? I don't remember any of that. I don't remember any of that. Like, that day didn't exist. And my memory bank does not even exist. To the point where you're like questioning, was there somebody... Are you confusing me with one of your other friends?
Right.
No. You were there. And then somebody else tells you were there. That's kind of scary.
All right. So we got a lot more questions. So we'll get to that next week.
After this really long beer break.
We're going to take a beer break for a week.
About a week beer break.